guys? Welcome back to the Football Corner Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremiah Queen. And of course, before we get started with today's episode, I would like for my viewers out there on YouTube to hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell so you can stay up to date when new videos drop on the channel. And also, if you listen to me on a podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or even Spotify, please subscribe to the podcast. And we actually have some breaking news. It's some unfortunate news if you're a Vikings fan. Kirk Cousins went down in week 8 with an Achilles injury. Of course, the MRI hasn't come back, but usually when you have an Achilles injury, you're most likely going to be out for the season. He's probably going to have a torn Achilles. It's unfortunate because Kirk Cousins will play some of the best football, at least in the last 3 weeks at that. And the Vikings were able to get back to 500 and 4-4 after starting 0-3 on the season. It's unfortunate. I actually thought the Vikings were going to actually go on the tear and actually be able to make it to the playoffs and possibly go on a playoff run out of the wild card round. It looks like it's not going to be that way. Now your star quarterback's out. Your star wide receivers still has to come back. The things are not looking good for the Vikings going to the second half of the season. So it's unfortunate for the Vikings. But let's talk about the takeaways from Week 8. Week 8 had some really good matchups. You had Cincinnati versus the 49ers. You had Cowboys versus Rams. You had Jacksonville versus the Steelers, which was another defensive battle game. You had the Battle of MetLife, the Battle of New York, and the Jets and the Giants. But let's start with the Bengals. The Bengals are back. They're 4-3. They went into their bye at 3-3 at 500, and they came out of their bye playing a Niners team that is just spiraling out of control. This Niners team is not looking like the team that we thought after they beat the Cowboys. It looks like they have used all their juice in beating the Cowboys. They were so hell-bent on beating the Cowboys that now they're on a 3-game losing streak going into the bye week. And you know who they got to play out the bye? The red-hot Jacksonville Jaguars, who right now currently has the longest winning streak in the NFL with the Chiefs losing to the Broncos. I should be talking about the Bengals, but I'm going to talk more about what I see for the 49ers. First off, I never seen a guy who's in concussion protocol come back so fast. It's unusual. Usually, if someone's in concussion protocol, he's usually not going to be able to play. I understand they said, well, he no longer had symptoms. He was able to. It was the grace period that he was able to bypass the concussion protocol injury. I think Brock Purdy still was in concussion protocol. Did you not see the way he played in Week 8? 2 bad interceptions and essentially cost his team the game. They lost 31-17. Brock Purdy, and I said this about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. Everybody call him an elite quarterback. He's not an MVP frontrunner. Okay, let's go to set that to bed. He's not an MVP frontrunner. He has 7 interceptions on the season and 5 in the last 2 games. That's against the Vikings and now against the Bengals. Brock Purdy, this is what happens when you're a young quarterback. See, people who's talking about Brock Purdy, oh, he can't do no wrong. He's 8-0, he's 10-0, and all the games he start and finishes. What happens when they start getting tape on you? See, I always say I need a full season sample size of games to determine what you are as a quarterback. And I think Brock Purdy is coming down to earth because defenses and teams are figuring out how he plays. It's not unusual that teams don't figure out how a quarterback play. If they have 17 games of film, they will figure you out. Doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback. There's a bunch of good quarterbacks in the league. Kirk Cousins is one of them. He's a B+ quarterback. But the difference between an elite quarterback takes you to the next step. He played an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow, and you saw the difference between both of the. Joe Burrow is leading his team right now, and they're 4-3. Brock Purdy and the 49ers team is going down, and Brock Purdy has tons of talent. You can say, well, he's missing his all-pro left tackle, his all-pro receiver, Deebo Samuels. That's what happens in the NFL. Your team is not always going to be healthy. That's the name of the business. If you expect your team to be fully healthy going into the playoffs, then you're sadly mistaken. Your star players get out. What happens is how can you win games despite you actually not having all your star pieces together, not having your Pro Bowl players together? You still got Brandon Ayuk. You still got George Kittle. You still got Christian McCaffrey. You still have more talent than a lot of teams in the NFL. So I don't want to hear no excuses for why Brock Purdy is playing bad. He's playing bad football. The Niners are spiraling out of control, and now they're going to go on their bye week in Week 9, but coming back in Week 10, they have to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's time for my favorite segment on Monday's episodes, and that's heroes and zeros. Of course, if you're a hero, that means you were heroic in your performance in order to lead your team to victory. And if you're a zero, that means you didn't do anything to lead your team to a victory. And let's start with our heroes, shall we? Jalen Hurts, 4 touchdowns in a victory over the Washington Commanders. You could say, well, it's the Commanders. Commanders are not a good team. If you watch the Commanders and Philly matchup, it always goes down to the wire. It's always a shootout. It's always a great battle. This is what happens when you play an interdivisional opponent. Jalen Hurts is the better quarterback, so of course he's going to come out to a victory. But I like the performance. 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing. He was dynamic in that game. And let's transition to a quarterback who's made his rookie debut. Will Levis, the guy from Kentucky, the guy that got drafted in the second round, and everybody thought he was be a first-round pick. He had 4 touchdowns to get against a great Falcons defense, who I didn't see this coming. I thought that Will Levis was a okay quarterback. I thought he could be a mediocre quarterback, maybe a B quarterback, maybe the ceiling of a B plus. But at least in 1 week, Will Levis was that guy. 4 touchdowns, over 200 yards passing against a really good Falcons secondary that was top 5 in defending the pass. Now, there's a few questionable calls in that game, and also Desmond Ridder went out in the concussion protocol, but he wasn't playing good prior to that. Taylor Heineke tried to drive them down the field in order for the Falcons to win, but a drop pass was happening on 4th down. But Will Levis was that guy, at least for 1 week. Now, I've seen this before. I'm not going to overhype Will Levis' performance. There's a lot of quarterbacks who do good in their debuts. Now, what can he do going for the rest of the season? Because the Titans are 3-5. Ryan, but you know what's actually kind of funny is that he has more passing touchdowns in 1 game in his first start than Ryan Tannehill had in his 6 starts. Ryan Tannehill had 2 touchdowns in 6 games. Will Levis got 4. So it should go to show you who I think Mike Vrabel is going to be going with in the future of this Titans. And let's talk about our zero. It's going to be Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes is an elite quarterback, but you can't excuse him for his bad play. Understand they say he was battling the flu prior the weekend. That weekend or the few days prior to lead up to that game. It doesn't matter. If you come suit up on Sunday, you got to play. It's his first loss against the Denver Broncos. He had over 200 yards passing, but no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That defense tried to hold Russell Wilson, and it's not like Russell Wilson lit the award on fire. He only had a little over 100 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. But I thought Pat Mahomes was a zero, and he's the reason why his team lost on Sunday in Week 8. It's time for our Week 8 MVP, and it'd be none other than a kicker. Yes, a kicker won the Week 8 MVP. It would be Greg Zuerlein, the kicker for the New York Jets, kicking a kick to lead them to overtime, kicking a field goal in overtime to give them the Jets a victory. Now the Jets are 4-3, and they're storming in AFC. Now let's transition into the upset of Week 8, and that will be the Broncos and their victory over the Chiefs. It's the first time the Broncos have beat Pat Mahomes in his career. It took forever. It took a long time, but you knew eventually it was going to happen. Congratulations to the Broncos for them having the upset of Week 8. Thank you for watching and listening to the Football Corner Podcast episode. I would like to thank you, all my supporters, for the last 14 months to get me to over 100 subscribers on YouTube. It's been a journey. It's been me being patient. All my content is for the audience, is for the viewers. Thank you for supporting me on this journey. And as always, see you next time.